Good morning. This is Playing to Win with me, Mark, and you, Brad. Good morning, Brad. How are you?
I'm fantastic, Mark. How are you today, man?
I'm excited. I got to
Good
tell
day
you,
so far?
a great day so far. And the last week, we
Yeah.
were talking about how to start the year off right, and that we knew that the temptation coming off of the holidays was to kind of have some of that holidaical inertia. It's a word. It's a word. Don't challenge that. Uh,
Holidaical.
holidaical.
Write that one down.
And so we really challenged ourselves, in addition to everybody listening. But really, I think you and I both took it as like, don't mess this week up because this is the first
Yeah.
first and 10 for the year, and you got to hit the year hard and set the precedent for working hard. And I got to the end of the week and looking around, look at all the companies I worked with and the stuff I did. I feel proud and happy that the people I worked with and I did it. Did you do it? Did you kick the year off right?
Oddly enough, it's funny you say that because I didn't know you were going to start with that.
I didn't either. I
So,
didn't either.
so,
It just kind
I
of.
am, yeah, fortunately, I did have a good week. I forced myself to do the behaviors. At the end of the week, I sat down. I have a lot of opportunities that rolled from last week into this week intentionally. And last week was a really good week. Felt good about it. Felt like it was a lot of good momentum to kick off the year. So yeah, I'm actually that made my heart beat a little bit because you threw that one at me and I wasn't expecting it. So yeah, thank God I actually did the stuff we talked about. Otherwise, I'd be scrambling. Woo.
Oh, well, that would have been fine too, because we would have talked about the obstacles and we would have humanized. People would have started to realize that Brad Fryer is a human being, not Superman perfect all the time. Um,
People
or
think that.
are you? Or maybe, actually, I said that, and maybe there's no proof. Maybe you're not human. Maybe you've never made a mistake.
I am more than human. I am one of the most fallible humans that you could
I don't
get to
believe
know.
that. I don't believe that.
Man, well, the beauty of it though, Mark, is that I, you we spend all the time on the podium, helping companies, helping salespeople, helping leaders, and so we have some built-in accountability. Because for me, the last thing I want to do is be a hypocrite. So I won't stand on the podium and talk about a topic or promote a method or accountability if I'm not going to do it myself. And so there's that built in that, don't be a hypocrite, Brad. If you're going to talk about goal setting, you better have your goals so that if somebody says, hey, what do your goals look like? You can say, oh, here's what they look like. Or journaling. If you don't journal, somebody's going to call you out on it one day and go, what do you say in your journal? What does your journal look like? Oh, well, I have it right here. Let me show you. But sometimes you fail. For me, I mean, I'll fall off of journaling for a week at a time, or there's just some days you just don't feel like doing it, right? And you have to be able to let yourself off the hook. You have to be able to um, miss something, skip something, punt
All right.
on something.
So I
But
love where you're going with this. So how do you know the difference between, or how do you even just recognize? Because I think it's a perfect second beat to what we did last week, which was hit the year strong. Don't let yourself off the hook. Set the bar high for executing the fundamentals. I mean, it kind of had a contradictory sounding message of like, don't set the bar too high, but do
mhm,
set the bar and do execute on it and make sure you're building strong habits. And I think that's the essence of that. So here we are, week two. We're admitting some possibility of imperfection. Maybe last week didn't go great. Maybe something threw you off. So how do you coach people and how do you address yourself those weeks that just you didn't hit the mark and now it's week two and now you're behind the gun and you got to get back up to speed.
yeah. Well, I mean, I guess depending upon what it is that you're referring to, because I mean, if you missed your goals or if you're so far behind your goals, the beautiful thing about your goals is that they're your goals. And so if you fall so far behind that it becomes an unachievable um, target, adjust the target based on your current circumstances, right? That's part of letting yourself off the hook. Um, People who exercise, if you miss a couple of days at the gym, like this morning, man, I tell you, I had a long weekend. Did not feel like working out this morning, but I knew if I just went out and I call it pretending to work out, but that's where I'll
Right.
get on the elliptical for 20 minutes, and then do a little bit of body weight stuff. But it's not high, but it's a placeholder.
Right,
You
right.
know, it's like
Yeah.
just
It's the
get out
habit.
of bed.
Yeah.
It's the habit. It's the habit. And so even when you don't feel like it, let yourself off the hook if you miss it. If you miss journaling, let yourself off the hook and just pick it up and start doing it again. But if you're missing your goals, it's okay to realign your goals because they're yours. They don't affect anybody else. Obviously, they affect your family,
Right.
but if you've missed the mark completely, adjust it, modify it.
So we
Now,
did that
don't
a
keep
lot
using that as an excuse.
well, it makes sense. So in a bigger picture, in 2020, a lot of teams I worked with mid-year were like, "Here's our 1-year plan. Here are our goals. Here's our revenue goals." And guess what? Probably
Yeah,
not going to happen. And so the
yeah.
discipline in my world is all right. Unless things are so well, we did have two scenarios. Things that were so bad, we did revise the plan for the year when it was something that was just going to mock us as impossible. But some companies were like, no, that's the plan, that's the goal. We know we're not going to hit it, or if not, it doesn't demotivate us to have the 1-year goal as we left it. But our quarterly targets are going to be adjusted based on what was realistic. And so there really is this contradiction of this is the plan for the year. That's not exactly what's going to happen, but this is what we're doing for the quarter, and we're going to reward ourselves for doing what's possible and set our sights on what's possible and execute along that. And that's kind of on a long-term capacity. The short-term kind of has that same thing, right? So last week didn't happen. Your goal was 20 calls, 7 calls, 2 calls, 0 calls. Whatever your goal was, you didn't hit it. Turn the page. What's the goal for this week? Set it up. Don't bring the burden of the past, but you got to create that space for that placeholder like you described, because otherwise if that space isn't there, you're not going to have the chance to make 1, 2, 10 calls, whatever it is that activity is you need to do.
So what do you think? What do you tell people when they miss a week and they're faltering in week 2?
Well, this is a good. So you kind of hitting me with the questions like like I don't know the answer until you ask me the question, and I'm thinking we always look at a 13 rolling weeks at a company level, and in a team health scorecard, you got to look at what the patterns are, and if the patterns aren't successful, if it's not working, we got to figure out something. We got the wrong person in the wrong seat, or we got the wrong set of goals, wrong activities, and we might have to really take a step back and say like, is this a complete fundamental misalignment? So I guess it's possible that if you look even today in week 2, and week 2 is off track, week 1 was off track, and if you're really honest with yourself, the previous 11 weeks were also off track. There's a fundamental issue there, and that might need some introspection. But if the first 10 weeks were okay and last week sucked, it's like, okay, turn the page, and we're into this, and what micro adjustment do you need to make to protect those fundamentals? Now, I would say really start looking at focus right now, because this is a time of year when we got some bright ideas from the holidays, and some of them are really good, and some of them are going to clog us up with some distractions. And I had a lot of distractions last week, and I really had to force myself to focus on the fundamentals and make sure that before I started working on the new stuff, that I had the basics handled and I could work on the new stuff in good conscience. And I feel pretty good that happened.
So when people do struggle to get the ball rolling, what do you think the biggest driver behind that is? Like when they just don't get themselves to do it.
Well, it depends on what the activity is. So
let's make it simple. Let's say prospecting. Let's say outbounding. And you could put whatever outbounding out. You can make it email. You can make it cold calls. You can make it LinkedIn. You could make it asking for whatever. But let's just say outbounding.
Yeah. Well, so my go-to feeling is oftentimes we have people with multiple roles. And so if you've got multiple roles in your court, say you're an account manager and a prospector, or you're a CEO and you're responsible with generating some demand. You've got 2 very different functions. Usually there's one that's sort of inbound and kind of an outbound. Account management and prospecting are opposite. Doing work and producing work and selling are opposite. And what we find is that we get very distracted into something we like a little bit better, or something that has a little higher sense of urgency. And so if we've got that problem, we're going to have to take a step back and say, like, what's most important, and see if something on my plate needs to be delegated or blocked off, because this internal internal sense of moral decisioning is going to mislead us, and we're going to have too much sense of urgency that distracts us. That's the first thing I want to know. I want to know, like, do we have conflict of roles? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. I was definitely thinking down a different track, but I really like where you started there because that makes sense.
So where do you go? So assuming where you were going to go is we don't have a conflict of role. You got a job, you know what you need to do. What's your go-to for somebody who's in the right job, doesn't have something pulling them in the wrong direction, and they're still not doing the fundamental thing?
You know, I mean, I'm adjusting my answer to say I would start with what Mark said because that makes sense, right? I mean, there's a lot of people that have creative avoidance, and creative avoidance is we make excuses for why we don't do the stuff we know we need to do. Sometimes we have job functions that we grab and pull into our realm to keep us from doing the things that we're uncomfortable doing. And so I think to your point, making sure that there is the bandwidth and the ability to do it from the time perspective and the roles and responsibility perspective makes a lot of sense. But I start with, kind of looking at the attitude, behavior, and the technique, right? Which one of those categories does it fall into? Is it a technique issue, meaning that they're not doing it because they just don't know how? They sit there and they stare at their computer. They're making time for it, but they just don't know what to say or how to say it. And so it's the technique of it. Is it a behavioral thing? And behavioral thing for me, I think goals, right? Do they really understand how those behaviors tie into their goals? Do they believe that if they do this stuff today, it's going to help them achieve the goals they have set for, tomorrow or for next year? And so, helping them connect the dots to say, yeah, this really matters for what you're trying to achieve. And the last piece is the attitudinal, right? The belief system. Do I believe that it's important? But also is what's my belief system about the behavior? I love talking about cold calling with people because, people have this in what's the word I'm looking for? Irrational fear of cold calling. Right? And if you think about it, someone once asked me that, when I first started in Sandler 17 years ago, they say, Brad, if you could make the money you wanted to make playing golf every day, would you do it? I was like, hell yeah, absolutely. I would do it every day. They said, well, then if I told you that you could make the money you wanted to make making cold calls every day, would you want to do it? And I was like, nah, no way, man. No way. Yeah. They're like, well, which one's technically more difficult?
Right.
Well, golf is, you're chasing this little round ball, 500 yards, trying to knock it in a little cup with water and sand and trees. Cold calling, you're sitting in a climate controlled environment in an ergonomic chair, lifting something that weighs about 3 ounces and calling strangers who don't care about you, don't know you from Adam. And as soon as you've hung up, they've already forgotten who you are. So why are we so scared of it? Why is it so debilitating? So that's where I come at it from with the activities. It's the attitude, the behavior, or the technique.
Right.
Which one of those seems to be the thing keeping us from doing it?
So there's a lot of perspectives we touched on, and I want to make sure this is tangible and digestible to any number of roles and positions that are listening to this. And so if you're CEO, you have a very different perspective if you're the telemarketer. And so from the CEO perspective, it really is taking a step back and have you delegated properly? Do you have enough space, enough containment to make sure that if you're going to do something to grow the business, that like it can't be messed with? Like today is my whole day. Like that's actually what I do. If I got so many things I can work on that if I mix the day of client creation and interaction with clients, like it'll fall apart. Like I need the whole day blocked, and that's how I do it. But so taking that step back, delegating well, then one level down from leadership and management and CEO and even sales manager, when we're looking at the measurements, I see a lot of people measuring too many damn things. And if you're measuring too many damn things, there's too many places to hide. And is it more about proposals? Is it more about calls? Is it about visits? Is it about the quote size? Is it about the type of product? Is it more about service? It's like, well, I don't know what my priorities are. So I'm going to work on whatever's most comfortable. And at the end of the week, some of the metrics are up and some of them are down, and I'm not successful. So I very, very much encourage and really coach anybody who's leading the team to get it down to 1, 2, or 3 metrics. If you're really trying to change behavior, be crystal clear on the 1, 2, or 3 metrics of behaviors that are most critical, and let everything else kind of wait until you got those habits in place. And then you bring this down to the next level, to what you're saying about, do I see this really mapping to my success? And if you don't, that's a whole set of problems. But if you do, then you've got this attitude, a perspective of getting it done. And so the end of that road is sort of, what's Stephen Pressfield, the Art of War, or War of Art. Have you heard of that book, The War of Art?
I've heard Art of War.
Right. The War of Art is a great book, and it talks about this concept of resistance as being directly coupled with us raising our station in life. If we're going to do something to elevate ourselves, something creative, something that moves us to a higher level, it's a fantastic book to kind of like punch you in the face about, like, go to work. It's not comfortable. Get used to it not being comfortable. And so if you're stuck there, if you're stuck about elevating your life, you know exactly what to do. Everything's lined up and there's nowhere to hide, and you're still just like, I can't make the dial. The War of Art is probably a great place to get that attitude in check.
Interesting. I'll write that one down. Never even heard of that one.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's interestingly written from the perspective of a writer, and then it flows into entrepreneurship. It flows. It's really just about any time you want to elevate. That's the whole book. That's the essence of the book. You should understand that if you're feeling resistance, if you're feeling that inability to want to move forward, that means you're doing the right thing, and you need to get comfortable with that feeling and engineer your habits, behaviors, and your world to push through that little by little and make habits out of that, because that's the sense that you're on the right track.
Interesting. All right, I dig it. So the question I was going to ask is, what do you tend to struggle with the most? But maybe the better question to get a bigger response is, what do you see your clients struggle most with when it comes to taking action in the first of the year?
Oh, in the first of the year, I thought we were talking about just the behaviors. So in the first of the year,
well, you can be, but I think now's the time when people are trying to get alignment and trying to feel like they're gonna get a head of steam going for the year, and so maybe the mindset's different this time of year than it is any other time of the year. So it doesn't have to be framed that way.
No, the time is always the same. It's after some type of reset, a quarterly, an annual, a year end, something. That's this reflection period, and then that's as soon as we turn the corner and we start the next day, that's the opportunity to drop the ball. And so that's where I learned the first and 10. It's, you got 12 weeks in the quarter. If your first level 10 meeting, which is your first weekly meeting pulse to make sure everything's on track, if everybody says all of our goals are on track, and the justification for that is, I got 11 more weeks, I can probably get anything done in 11 more weeks, then you've missed the opportunity. That first week is, you got to hit the ground running, because that's your opportunity to set the pace. That's, if you want to win this game, you cannot take any downs off. So you don't have that many.
Which, by the way, I don't know if you followed any of the games this weekend, but this was the wild card weekend.
Yeah, super wild card weekend.
Super wild. 6 games on, and anybody who's out there making excuses as to why they can't succeed, go back and watch the Cleveland Browns versus the Pittsburgh Steelers last night. Pittsburgh was something like, I don't know, 12-2, or, I mean, they had
12-2.
They,
I think is what
they've run the season. Cleveland is the Cleveland Browns, and that's what they're known for, is just being the Cleveland Browns. Hadn't made the playoffs in 20 some odd years. Hadn't had a playoff win in almost 30 years, I think. They didn't practice this week because of COVID. Their head coach was
COVID
on the side
at home.
with COVID. They had all these people that were out, and Cleveland absolutely annihilated
Yeah.
Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
I
Super
mean, it
solid.
wasn't even a competition, and it was from the word go. So yeah, I mean, you talk about we're here talking about playing to win and talking about doing the right things to succeed. Making excuses, woe is me, mindset, belief
Right.
system. Cleveland went into that game believing they could win, believing they were talking to Baker Mayfield and they said, "Man, hey, how is the lack of practice going to affect your team this Sunday?" This was a interview I saw earlier in the week, and without a beat, he goes, "It's not going to." Well, but you guys aren't going to be practicing this week. Not a problem. We're going to play great. I mean,
Yeah.
the way he responded was just without a bat of an eye, belief, conviction that it was going to be a good game, and
That's
they killed him.
it's a wonderful metaphor because if watching the game, the mistakes on Pittsburgh's part were pretty quick. But the game wasn't
Yeah,
over immediately. It was
yeah.
not over immediately, but you saw things moving quickly, and then there was an opportunity for Pittsburgh to get back in the game, and then that didn't last. So all that metaphor is that how many deals are you going to close this week? I don't know. I don't care. That's not the point. The point is
Yeah.
you got to hit it hard and set the pace and set the standard. And it's every single down is a few more yards. And it's kind of the small ball mentality to switch sports. It's not about a grand slam on every single pitch. It's about get on base, get on base, get on base.
But you make a great point, right? Yeah. I mean, the first play out of the game, the first play out of the gate, Pittsburgh snaps it over Big Ben's head, goes into the end zone. Cleveland falls on it. So that was the first offensive play for Pittsburgh. Sometimes things don't start out your way, but the problem that Pittsburgh had was they never allowed themselves to breathe and to get into a flow. I mean, Ben threw 4 interceptions, which
Right. Record
Ben
breaking
never
for
throws
him.
4 interceptions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so that shows you that they were grinding, that they made mistakes. You could tell he was forcing the ball. You could tell he was trying to rush. He was doing things that obviously he felt like he was playing from behind. And in business world, whenever you do feel like you've had a bad week or a bad month, you don't start grinding, right? You don't start gripping the ball tighter. On the golf course, the harder you grip that club, the worse your hit's going to be, right? You start white knuckling it, and you start
Yeah.
trying to steer the ball, and it's gonna go all sorts of. So yeah, you have to stay present and just do today what you can control today.
Yeah. So for better for worse, that NFL ball's at the highest level, the highest of the highest level. The world we're in most cases, isn't luckily. I mean, we may take it that seriously, but luckily the pressure's not quite that high. We got 52 weeks out of the year. We got 4 quarters that last all year, not not an hour of playing time. So if last week wasn't great, you can get away from the field. You can take a timeout and hit it this week. And it's setting the bar. Like, do I need to reach out to my clients? Do I need to connect with my people? Do I need to manage a little bit? Do I need to review the scorecard and hit a couple of metrics, take a clarity break? You got the chance to do it. And so I'm looking back to last week that one of 3 things is happening. It didn't happen. And now you got a chance to set a reasonable goal for the activities you're going to do, no matter what level you're at, the CEO or the telemarketer, any in between. You can set a reasonable activity goal for this week to hit it and to set the pace, not to fix the world, not to fix last week, but to set the standard of excellence. The second thing that might have happened is that you did it. And you want to keep that going. And this is the concept of setting a streak. Set yourself up for success. Benchmark back to that. A little improvement maybe. Or maybe this week is even a little bit busier. And how do you maintain that? The third thing, and this is, if you're lucky enough to have this problem, it's good, but it's a problem nonetheless. And that is last week, maybe tied with the previous 12 weeks, is really good and going the right direction. And starting to get you to this feeling of a little comfortable or a little too busy, and that, everything did work and I can take this week off. That's the kiss of death. I've been kissed many times. So if you want to avoid that spiral of like digging yourself a hole and digging yourself out and get it, so this is the opportunity to say, all right, what's the little piece? How do I keep that? How do I protect that spot? So every single week, and this is the success discipline of understanding that lots of good things may be starting to happen for you in 2021, as I see a lot of things from my clients. And so how do you protect those fundamentals so you can reap the benefits in future weeks, future months? Does that make sense to you, Brad?
Oh, I love it. And so my follow-up question to you was going to be, so when you find yourself um, in those positions where the momentum has caught up with you and you've got a lot going on, you've got opportunities, you're quoting, you're closing, you're onboarding, you got all this stuff going on, but you want to continue to feed the beast, right? You want to continue to keep the flywheel going. How do you do that? I mean, do you just dial it down a little bit and say, look, instead of 25 outbounds this week, I'm just going to do 5 because I want to keep that placeholder, but I don't expect it to be the volume that I've been doing up to this point? Or do you just force yourself to do the same volume? I mean, how do you, rather than taking the time off and going, okay, well, I don't need to do that anymore, do you allow yourself the liberty of turning the knob?
Well, so there's probably two polarities to that. If you're an individual and you're thinking about yourself, about how, especially like consultant types and professionals where the selling and the working kind of are intermingled, that you kind of have to know yourself as how's this going to go. So I know some people who can just keep it, pedal to the metal, and they just kind of get to the red line and they just kind of stay there. That's not me. That does not work for me. And so I've had to learn where my limit is. And so it becomes a pretty sophisticated exercise to say, what is the difference between, what's the true sweet spot? Because you can easily go from like, you can get turned into not laziness, but excuses. Like, if I take on more clients, this will never work. It's like, well, how many is the right? What is the right way to keep client activity going? And maybe somebody doesn't start in February, they start in March. Or maybe I will continue to prospect, and if I can't take them, I'll send them to somebody else, and figure out how to kind of balance this out in a more sophisticated way than like foot on the gas, foot off the gas, foot on the gas, foot off. You have to figure out that middle ground. That's not easy. It requires a lot of peer exercise, that kind of thing. Right. Feather, for sure. Now, if you're on a team, it's a totally different thing. Your management team, you've got everybody with different roles. And so if you've got, like, if you're the sales manager or the leader of the team, you're going to have a clear conversation. How much can you handle? What does it look like? Who's going to do it? Talk it through and make sure you've got the essence of the behaviors that are non-negotiables. It's in most of those cases, it's like, it's not so much about volume as what are the non-negotiable behaviors that you need to just maintain.
That's great stuff. Great topic. Couldn't think of a better way to spend the second week of the year.
I had been planning that topic for milliseconds.
You surprised me in the beginning. That was out of left field, but I like it. That was great.
That you and I surprised you a lot.
No, yeah, you do.
Do you like do,
but they're usually, no, I don't. They're usually things like, Brad, say something funny. This was a good surprise.
All right, so
we've got about 90 seconds. So the takeaway for me was that you got to keep the foot on the throttle, but you also have to allow yourself the ability to let yourself off the hook and identify why you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. But if you are doing it and things are going great, don't let your foot off the gas. Just feather it a little bit. If you need to tweak it or adjust it, that's okay. But keep the space saver. Keep doing the activities. Good, great topic for me today.
Yeah, man, it's exciting. And I think just like last week, as much as I'm preaching this, I'm listening to this because this is the kind of thing that I need to do for myself and watch out for my clients, because it's easy to lose a sense of too much or too little.
Yeah, love it. Love it.
Well, we're out of time for this week. We'll see you next time. And this until then, play after play. Take your eyes off the scoreboard. You just got to keep playing down after down and get to the next first down. And we'll see you next time on Playing to Win with me and Brad. See you next time, brother.
Happy selling.